Hi everyone, welcome back to Forsaken Joe. Buckle up, because what I'm about to share isn't some random he said, she said drama. It's the kind of story that still keeps me awake at night, even a year later. It all started with a storm, not a metaphorical one. I mean an actual storm that cut off the power in our neighborhood for hours. I was sitting in the dark, lighting candles, when I noticed something glowing in our bedroom. Isla's old tablet, the one she claimed she never used anymore, was flashing with notifications. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe it was the silence, the unease that had been building for months. Maybe it was fate. But what I found wasn't just a betrayal. It was a full-blown secret life. Pictures, messages, whole conversations with someone I didn't know. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying to delete them. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I spent that entire night scrolling through every detail, like a masochist who couldn't look away. The way she laughed in her texts with him, the plans they made to finally tell me the truth. It felt like reading a diary where I was the villain in someone else's love story. By sunrise, I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just left. No goodbye, no explanation. I walked out into that storm and kept driving until my car's tank was almost empty. I needed to disappear, and I did, for a whole year. No calls, no messages, no trace of the man I used to be. I wanted her to think I had vanished off the face of the earth, because in a way, I had. But then, out of nowhere, she found me. And the first words out of her mouth weren't, "I'm sorry," or "I miss you." They were something I never in a million years expected to hear. When I opened the door and saw Isla standing there, soaked from the rain like she had run through hell just to find me, I didn't say a word. A year of silence had hardened me. I wanted to slam the door in her face, but I didn't. Maybe I wanted to see if she'd crumble, if she'd admit that what she did destroyed me. But she didn't even look ashamed. Her eyes were blazing like she had something urgent to say. "Clifton," she said, her voice shaking, "you have to listen to me. It's not what you think. It was never what you think." I almost laughed at that. Not what I think? I had seen the messages, the pictures, the plans. But before I could throw her words back at her, she dropped something that froze my blood. "He's gone, and I think someone is after me. I think someone is watching you too." I stared at her like she was insane. Gone? Who? Watching me? I hadn't heard her voice in over a year, and now she was speaking like this was some twisted thriller instead of a messy breakup. I told her to leave, but she pushed past me into my apartment, her clothes dripping on the floor. She looked over her shoulder like someone might be standing there in the hallway. She started talking fast, like she hadn't spoken to another soul in weeks. I left him months ago, but then weird things started happening. My car brakes failed out of nowhere. I started getting anonymous letters with no return address. Letters that mentioned you, Clifton. They knew where you went. At that moment, I wanted to tell her I didn't care. That I wanted no part of her drama. That she had already destroyed me once and I wasn't going to let her do it again. But then she reached into her coat and handed me an envelope. My name was scrawled on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, there was a single Polaroid photo. It was me, asleep, in my new apartment. I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't told anyone where I was. No friends, no family, nobody. And yet, someone had been here, watching me, taking pictures. Isla looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Do you believe me now?" she whispered. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I just sat at my kitchen table with that Polaroid in front of me, the image burned into my brain. There I was, lying on my side, mouth slightly open, completely unaware that someone had been in my apartment watching me sleep. Every creak of the building, every distant car horn outside the window made me flinch. Isla sat across from me, wrapped in a blanket, staring into her mug of tea like it was some kind of lifeline. Neither of us spoke for a long time, as if words would make this nightmare more real. Finally, I broke the silence. "Who was he?" My voice cracked, and I hated that it still sounded weak after all this time. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked up at me with this expression that made my skin crawl. Half fear, half guilt. "His name was Elias," she said softly. "I met him at the gallery, and it wasn't supposed to be anything. But then things got dark. He wasn't just normal Clifton. He had people who scared me. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to ask why she ever got involved with someone like that. But instead, I just sat there, frozen. People who scared you, I repeated, like my brain couldn't process the rest of her confession. She nodded. The kind of people who don't just walk away when you break things off. Elias started talking about money, about things I didn't want to be involved in. I tried to leave him, and then I got the first letter. A photo of me, taken from across the street. They told me if I didn't give them what they wanted, they'd come after you too. The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer with every word she spoke. I had spent a year blaming myself for not being enough for her, for running away instead of fighting for what we had. But this wasn't some ordinary affair. This was a trap I didn't even know I was caught in. I stared down at the Polaroid again, and suddenly noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the background, through my window, there was a faint reflection of someone's silhouette. I felt a cold sweat break over me. "We need to call the cops," I said, but Isla's reaction was immediate. She shook her head violently. "You don't understand. If we involve the police, they'll know we're scared, and once they sense fear, it gets worse. Elias used to say that fear was the only currency that mattered. I should have thrown her out then. I should have told her this wasn't my problem anymore, but deep down, something in me couldn't let go. Maybe I was still that pathetic man who loved her too much, or maybe it was just the thought of someone standing over me while I slept that made me feel like I was drowning. Either way, I couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. By morning, I made a decision I never thought I would. I was going to find out who Elias really was and why these people were watching me. I didn't care how dangerous it got. I needed answers, even if they destroyed me. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and obsessive digging. I didn't trust Isla's version of the story completely. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe it was just my stubborn need to know exactly who had invaded my life. Either way, I started investigating Elias. At first, it felt hopeless. I didn't even know his last name. All I had were a few scattered pieces from the messages I'd seen on her tablet a year ago. Names of restaurants, a gallery event, a few places they had been together. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to start asking questions. I went back to the gallery where Isla used to work, pretending I was an old client. The woman at the reception desk recognized her name immediately, but froze when I mentioned Elias. It wasn't just surprise, it was fear. She lowered her voice and told me, "If you know what's good for you, don't bring him up around here. He's not the kind of man you look for." When I pressed her, she gave me a single name of someone who might talk. An artist who had a falling out with Elias over something that was never spoken about publicly. When I found the artist, an older man named Jonah, he looked like someone who'd been hiding from the world for years. His studio was barely lit, the windows all boarded up. At first, he refused to talk, but when I mentioned Isla's name, his expression turned dark. He told me Elias had been involved in things beyond art, something to do with laundering money through private sales. Jonah swore Elias wasn't just dangerous, he was untouchable, the kind of man who had people everywhere, people who could make someone disappear, and no one would ask questions. That night, I went home with more questions than answers. I couldn't shake the feeling that Isla had dragged me into something far bigger than just a messy affair. I started noticing strange things. A car parked across the street that I'd never seen before. A shadow that lingered just a little too long in the alley when I went out to take the trash. I told myself I was imagining it, but my gut told me otherwise. When I confronted Isla again, she didn't look surprised. "You're starting to see what I've been living with," she said quietly. "They don't forget. They don't forgive. Elias might be gone, but the people around him, they want to make sure neither of us talks." I asked her what she meant by gone, but she avoided my eyes. The worst part? That night, I found a new envelope under my door. No stamp, no address, just slipped quietly into my life while I wasn't looking. Inside was another photo. This time, it wasn't just me. It was me and Isla sitting in my kitchen the very night she had shown up. I felt something inside me break. Whoever this was, they weren't just watching. They were close. Too close. The photo of us sitting in my kitchen felt like a violation far worse than anything I had experienced in my life. It wasn't just proof that someone was watching. It was proof that they had been in my building, inside the walls of the life I had tried to rebuild. Every creak of the floorboards above, every faint knock in the hallway suddenly became a threat. I slammed the door and locked every bolt I had, my hands trembling as I shoved a chair under the handle, like some desperate fool who thought wood and metal could keep out the kind of people Isla was talking about. I turned to her, shaking the envelope in my hand. "How long has this been going on? How long have they been watching me? I demanded, but she didn't answer. Instead, she just stared at me, her face pale, her lips trembling like she wanted to say something, but couldn't. That silence burned through me worse than any confession could. "You're not telling me everything," I said, my voice cracking. "What happened to Elias, Isla? You keep saying he's gone. What does that even mean? Did he leave you? Did he vanish? Or is he—" I stopped, the word dead hanging in the air like poison. She finally looked at me, her eyes glistening. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. "Elias wasn't supposed to find out about you. He wasn't supposed to— He got dangerous, Clifton. He started accusing me of spying on him. I think he knew I wanted to end things, and then one night—" She stopped mid-sentence, shaking her head violently, as if just remembering it was too much. "One night, what?" I pushed. She stared at me like she was weighing whether to trust me with the truth. "He disappeared," she said finally. "I don't know what happened to him, but the people who worked with him think I do. They think I took something from him. They've been watching me for months, waiting for me to slip, waiting for me to lead them to—" Her voice trailed off. "To what?" I asked, feeling my patience snap like a brittle bone. "To whatever he left behind. Elias had files, Clifton. Names, transactions, things that could bury a lot of powerful people. He said he trusted me with them once, but I never saw anything, and now they think you might have them." It hit me like a cold wave. Someone out there believed I was part of this nightmare, that I was holding on to something that could ruin them. I wanted to scream that I was just a guy who couldn't even hold his marriage together, that I had no clue about any of this. But what good would that do when the people watching us didn't care about the truth? That night, I couldn't stay in the apartment. Every shadow felt like someone lurking, every sound like footsteps creeping closer. Isla insisted we pack and leave, but I had nowhere to go. I had spent the last year running from her, and now I was running with her, from people I couldn't even see. By morning, I realized something that chilled me to the core. If Elias had really vanished, someone somewhere must have filled that power vacuum. And if they believed I was holding the key to whatever Elias left behind, then disappearing again wouldn't be enough. I needed to know the truth, not just about Elias, but about Isla. Because for all I knew, I was just another pawn in whatever twisted game she had dragged me into. We left the apartment just before sunrise, carrying only what we could stuff into a single duffel bag. The city was still half asleep, the streets glistening from the early morning rain, but I felt eyes on me with every step I took. Isla insisted we take back roads, never the main streets, as though she had done this 100 times before. I didn't ask questions, but I watched her closely. She moved with the confidence of someone who wasn't just running. She was hiding from something she understood far too well. We ended up at a cheap roadside motel 2 towns over, the kind of place where the front desk clerk doesn't even ask for an ID and you pay in cash. As we sat on the creaky bed, Isla finally spoke. "Clifton, you have to understand, this isn't just about us. Elias wasn't some casual fling. He was dangerous. He had connections to people who don't hesitate when someone gets in their way. He talked about them like they owned everything. The galleries, the banks, even parts of the police." Her voice trembled, but there was something else under it, something that sounded a lot like guilt. I stared at her, trying to piece together the fragments of her story, but something wasn't adding up. "You keep saying they're after us, but why me? Why now? I was gone for a year, Isla. If they wanted me, they could have found me a long time ago. What aren't you telling me?" Her hands tightened around the mug of motel coffee like she was afraid it might slip. "I didn't just leave Elias," she finally said. "There was a night, a fight, things got ugly. He had these files, proof of everything he was doing, and I took them. I thought I could use them to bargain, to make sure he wouldn't come after me. But he vanished before I could do anything, and I think they believe I hid those files with you. They think you know where they are." The room seemed to tilt for a second. "You mean to tell me I've been living like a ghost for a year, and now I'm a target because you dragged me into this mess without even telling me?" My voice was sharp, and for once she didn't try to defend herself. She just looked at me with hollow eyes, like she had already accepted the damage she'd done. I needed air. I stepped outside, standing on the motel balcony, staring at the empty parking lot. That's when I noticed it, a black SUV parked just far enough away to blend into the shadows, engine off, windows tinted. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, and it never moved. My chest tightened. Maybe I was imagining it, but I didn't think so. Back in the room, I told Isla what I'd seen. She didn't look surprised. Instead, she went to the duffel bag and pulled out something I hadn't seen her pack, an old, scratched-up flash drive. She held it up between us like it was cursed. "This is what they want. This is what I took from him. If they find us, Clifton, they won't just take it, they'll take us too." For a moment, I just stared at it. A tiny piece of metal and plastic, small enough to lose between couch cushions, and yet powerful enough to ruin lives. I wanted to smash it into pieces, throw it into the nearest river, and walk away, but I couldn't. It was too late for that. Whether I wanted to or not, I was part of this now. As I sat back down on the bed, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think until then. I didn't know if Isla was telling me the full truth about that night with Elias. And some part of me was starting to wonder if Elias was really gone, or if he was closer than either of us could imagine. I couldn't stop staring at that flash drive. It looked so harmless, just a scratched piece of plastic and metal, but the way Isla held it made my skin crawl. It wasn't just fear in her eyes, it was something else. Guilt? Regret? Maybe both. I snatched it from her hand before she could stop me. "If this is what they want, then I need to know why. I'm done being in the dark, Isla." She tried to grab it back, shaking her head violently. "Clifton, don't. You don't understand what's on there. You don't want to understand." But I wasn't listening. A part of me felt like my entire life, all the pain, the confusion, the betrayal, was tied to this thing. I had to know. There was an old laptop on the motel desk, one I'd bought secondhand after I'd disappeared. My hands were sweating as I plugged the drive in. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a folder appeared. It wasn't just files. There were hundreds of them. Documents, photographs, recorded calls. I clicked on one at random, and within seconds I realized I wasn't looking at ordinary blackmail material. These weren't just business deals or financial records. There were names. Politicians, judges, corporate executives, tied to transactions that were straight out of a nightmare. Money laundering, art smuggling, offshore accounts. And buried in between all of that, I saw something that made my stomach turn. A picture of Isla with Elias. Not the kind of picture you take for memories. It was staged, deliberate, like evidence. She wasn't smiling. She looked terrified. I turned to her, but she had gone pale. "I didn't know he had that," she whispered. "I swear to you, Clifton, I didn't know." Her voice cracked, but I wasn't sure if I believed her. Another file caught my eye. A video. I hesitated before clicking it, but something in me needed to see. The screen flickered, and then there was Elias, sitting in a dimly lit room, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this," he said, his voice low and cold, "then I'm either dead or worse. And if Isla is with you, know this. She is not who you think she is." The room went dead silent. I felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. I looked at Isla, who was frozen, her eyes wide, shaking her head like a mad woman. "He's lying! He's twisting everything! Clifton, you can't believe him!" But the more she spoke, the more doubt started creeping into me. What did she really know about Elias? What did she do the night he vanished? And why did she still refuse to tell me the whole story? Before I could ask, there was a sound outside, a car door slamming, then another. Isla's face drained of color. She ran to the window, peeking through the blinds. "They found us," she whispered. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it would tear out of my chest. I grabbed the laptop and the flash drive, shoving them into the bag. "We're leaving," I said. But Isla didn't move. She was trembling, muttering under her breath. "It's too late. It's already too late." And in that moment, I realized that whatever we were running from, it wasn't just about Elias anymore. It was bigger, darker, and I wasn't sure either of us would survive it. The banging on the motel door felt like the end. My heart was hammering as I grabbed Isla by the arm and pulled her toward the back window. The SUV outside was no longer just parked. The headlights were on, and I saw two men in dark coats moving quickly toward our room. I didn't think, I just acted. We climbed out the back window, hitting the cold, wet pavement, and ran. My lungs burned with every step, but adrenaline kept me moving. We didn't stop until we reached an abandoned gas station down the road. Isla collapsed against the wall, her breathing ragged, clutching the duffel bag with the flash drive inside like it was her lifeline. "We can't keep running," I told her, my voice shaking. "We have to end this, Isla, right now." She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the walls come down. The fear, the lies, the guilt. It all poured out of her in a single breath. Clifton, I'm sorry. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I didn't just take the files to protect myself. I took them because Elias was planning something that could ruin so many lives. I was too scared to go to the police, but I knew if I stayed quiet, more people would get hurt. That's when I made the call, not to the police, not yet, but to a journalist I knew from years back, someone who owed me a favor. Within an hour, we were sitting in a dim cafe, handing over the flash drive to someone who promised to get the evidence into the right hands. If Elias's network was as powerful as Isla said, then the only way to fight them was to shine a light on every dark corner they had built. It took weeks, but eventually it worked. The files made headlines, investigations started, arrests were made. Whoever had been watching us vanished like smoke in the wind. And Elias? We never saw him again. Maybe he really was gone, or maybe he was just hiding, but either way, his grip on Isla, on me, was finally broken. We didn't magically fall back in love. Too much had happened, too many scars were left behind. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I wasn't just the man who got cheated on. I had fought back. And strangely, Isla looked at me with something I hadn't seen in a long time: respect. Now, as I sit here telling you all this, I feel a strange sense of closure. Maybe this story isn't the happily ever after kind, but it's real. I survived it. We survived it, and that's enough. So, what do you think? Have you ever stumbled upon something, a secret, a piece of information, that completely changed the way you saw someone? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this wild ride, don't forget to subscribe. You're watching Forsaken Joe, where the darkest truths always come to light.